picture this scenario for a second. You're standing in front of a whiteboard. You have this brilliant idea for a product or a service, something you've just completely poured your heart into.
Right, the classic founder moment.
Exactly. And your marker is just hovering over the board, and you're about to define your target audience. Because this is it, right? This is the ultimate crossroads that every single ambitious founder, creator, innovator, they all eventually face this.
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
And if you're listening to this deep dive right now and you're building something of your own, you are going to stand at this exact intersection. And, I mean, the temptation is just overwhelming to cast this massive wide net.
Oh, absolutely. You want to catch absolutely everyone.
Right. You want your product to be a household name, universally loved. You want to be the default choice for just the average person on the street.
Well, yeah, because it's the most natural impulse in the world. I mean, we inherently equate a large audience with a large success.
Yeah, it makes logical sense on paper.
It does, but that exact impulse is also the single most common reason that promising ventures fail. It's a trap.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive today. We are unpacking a truly massive dossier, and the source material comes from StartupLanes.
Which is an incredible ecosystem to pull data from.
It really is. For those unaware, it's this global business ecosystem and angel investment network. We're talking about an organization operating across 56 cities in 15 countries.
Yeah, facilitating hundreds of millions of dollars in funding.
Right. And when you evaluate thousands of startup pitches across that many diverse geographies, you aren't guessing anymore. You start to actually see the matrix.
Well, the patterns become absolutely undeniable when you look at that volume of data.
So the core philosophy we're examining today comes straight from the founder of StartupLanes, Dr. Shishir Gupta. And he presents this strategic thesis that, honestly, it flies directly in the face of the typical kind of ego-driven Silicon Valley playbook.
Yeah, it's a completely different mindset.
The thesis is basically this. Choosing a highly specific niche is not a reduction of your ambition. It's the consolidation of your firepower.
I love that phrasing, consolidating your firepower.
Because when you build a product designed to resonate with absolutely everyone, you engineer a product that fundamentally resonates with no one.
Exactly. And that concept feels like the total antithesis of the total addressable market obsession we see so often.
Right, the TAM obsession. I always thought you just wanted the biggest pie possible.
Most people do, but while we're not just going to debate this theoretically today, the dossier provides a really forensic breakdown of the actual math and history behind this.
Yeah, we have 10 global triumphs companies that flawlessly executed this niche-to-mass strategy. And then the flip side, 10 catastrophic corporate failures.
Where literal billions of dollars were just incinerated because they misjudged this exact dynamic.
Billions. It's wild. And we also have these raw, unvarnished insights pulled directly from founder communities on Reddit and Quora.
Which is great, because that offers a very stark reality check from people who are actually in the trenches right now.
So, to really grasp the stakes here, I think we have to establish the physical realities of the two extremes. Let's look at the mass market first.
Okay, yeah. So the defining characteristic of a mass market isn't just its massive size, it's really the nature of the competition.
Meaning the incumbents.
Right. When you sell a generalized product like, think traditional legacy banking or consumer packaged goods like toothpaste, you're operating in a space completely dominated by deeply entrenched, highly capitalized enterprise giants.
The companies that literally buy 30-second Super Bowl commercials just to remind you to drink their soda.
Precisely. And that creates a completely hostile environment for a newcomer because of your customer acquisition costs.
Right, CACs is everything.
In a mass market, the noise level is just deafening. To get a single consumer to even notice you, let alone actually buy from you, you have to spend an exorbitant amount of money on broad spectrum advertising.
So you're basically paying a massive premium just for the right to participate in the market.
Exactly. So flip the coin. What is the mechanical advantage of the niche market?
Well, a niche is a highly specific, sharply defined subsegment of the population, right?
Yes, but more importantly, it's a segment that shares a very intense, very unique pain point.
A pain point that the mass market giants are actively ignoring because it's, too small for them to care about.
That's exactly it. It doesn't move the needle for a multi-billion-dollar giant. But because your solution is perfectly tailored to that specific group, your customer acquisition cost plummets.
Because you aren't shouting into a crowded stadium anymore.
Right, you are whispering directly to a person who has been desperately searching for exactly what you offer.
The classic big fish in a small pond dynamic.
Yeah, but, looking through the StartupLanes research, the line between mass market and niche is not always a demographic line.
No, it's actually incredibly blurred sometimes. The dossier highlights the quick commerce industry to prove this, which I thought was fascinating.
Oh, companies like Zepto, Blinkit, or DoorDash, that is such a good example.
Because delivering groceries or takeout is the ultimate mass market need, right? I mean, every human being eats.
Right, on paper, delivering a bag of groceries is a total mass market value proposition.
But the operations described in the dossier are anything but mass market.
Quick commerce is perhaps the most fascinating modern hybrid of these two concepts. To make the unit economics of a 10-minute grocery delivery actually work, they survive strictly on hyper-niche geographic execution.
Geographic execution, meaning the map is the niche.
Exactly. They treat every single high-density urban neighborhood as an isolated, self-sustaining microeconomy.
Because, I mean, if you promise someone an avocado in 10 minutes, you mathematically cannot be dispatching a driver from the suburbs.
You can't. The physical limitations of time and traffic dictate your entire market. Think about the operational math of a dark store.
A dark store being basically a micro warehouse that's closed to the public, right?
Yeah, just aisles of groceries for the pickers. For that dark store to be profitable, it needs a staggering volume of order throughput.
How staggering are we talking?
Well, a delivery rider can only travel a mile or two, drop off the package, and get back to the store in under 15 minutes. To pay that rider and pay the commercial rent on that warehouse, you need hundreds of orders an hour.
Wow. Coming from a microscopic geographic radius.
Exactly. So they aren't looking at a massive city like Chicago or Mumbai and saying, let's capture this city.
They're looking at 3 specific blocks within that city. But how do they even isolate a geographic niche with that level of precision?
Through incredibly sophisticated proprietary geospatial analytics. I mean, they don't just look at a static map.
Right, they're layering data.
Heavy data. They layer location intelligence software over live dynamic data sets. They are analyzing household income distributions block by block.
That's intense.
They map peak commuting patterns, the physical topography of the roads, one-way streets, the density of local merchants. They're hunting for a very specific operational white space.
Where the density of hungry, cash-rich, time-poor consumers perfectly intersects with favorable traffic patterns.
Yes. And it's not just external city data either. The dossier mentions behavioral app telemetry.
Oh, right. Tracking how we behave on our phones to draw these maps? That part blew my mind.
It's relentless. They analyze first-party transaction data to an extreme degree. They know what you search for, what you add to your cart, and crucially, when you abandon your cart.
So if I build a cart and then close the app, they're logging exactly where I was standing.
Exactly. If their data shows a dense cluster of users in a specific high-rise apartment building consistently abandoning their carts at, say, 7:30 p.m.
Because the app estimates a 35-minute delivery time, which is too long.
Right. That is a blindingly bright signal for them. That data tells them exactly where to sign a commercial lease for the next dark store.
That is just wild. Okay, I want to pause here because I'm looking at how DoorDash specifically navigates this using what the dossier calls the 3-sided marketplace framework.
Oh yeah, the balancing act.
Because they aren't just trying to please the person ordering the burrito, are they?
Far from it. A 3-sided marketplace is incredibly delicate. Every single strategic decision, let's say, expanding their delivery radius by just half a mile, is filtered through 3 distinct lenses simultaneously.
Okay, so what's the first lens?
First, the consumer. Does this expansion hurt delivery speed or require higher fees? If yes, bad idea.
Makes sense.
And the second? Second is the dasher or the courier. Does this new radius pull them out of high-demand zones, which would hurt their hourly earnings and routing efficiency?
Because if the driver makes less money, they just log off the app.
Exactly. And third, the merchant. Does this generate enough new order volume to justify the commission we charge them?
It's like tuning a race car engine. If you give too much power to one side, the whole thing just tears itself apart.
That's a great analogy. If you lower fees for the customer, the dasher quits because they aren't making enough money.
Right. And if an expansion into a new neighborhood breaks the math for literally any one of those 3 constituents, the entire ecosystem collapses.
So they simply don't expand there. They remain strictly confined to their profitable geographic niche.
This actually shifts my entire understanding of what a target audience even is.
How so?
Well, if quick commerce companies are mapping out city blocks like a game of Risk, relying on cart abandonment telemetry just to survive, it seems to me that a niche isn't necessarily a type of person anymore.
Right, it's not just a psychographic profile.
Exactly. It's not just like outdoorsy millennials. A niche can be purely calculable density, a literal geographic coordinate.
That is a crucial revelation for anyone building a business today. A niche does not have to be an identity. It can be a hard, undeniable, operational reality.
The data reveals the safest, most mathematically efficient place to plant your flag.
Geography, when viewed through the lens of density, is one of the most powerful niches available.
All right, so you analyze the telemetry, you find the perfect high-density urban coordinate, and you plant your flag. That is step one.
But planting the flag is the easy part.
Right, because here is the massive roadblock that the StartupLanes dossier highlights next. What happens when you take that brilliant microstrategy, step into a boardroom, and ask venture capitalists to fund it?
Ah, yes. The boardroom reality check.
Because there is a glaring contradiction in the source material regarding how investors actually think. It's referred to as the investor's paradox.
The investor's paradox is this ideological whiplash that destroys a lot of unprepared founders.
So what is the actual paradox? Break it down for us.
Okay, the paradox is this. If you walk into a pre-seed or seed stage pitch, so the very earliest days of your company, venture capitalists will absolutely demand that you have a strict, highly defined, microscopic niche.
Okay, be tiny. Got it.
But if you survive and return a few years later for a Series B or Series C growth round, those exact same investors will demand that you abandon that niche and present a massive global mass market strategy.
On the surface, that sounds incredibly hypocritical. It's like telling someone to build a submarine and then 3 years later yelling at them because it doesn't fly.
It does sound crazy, but it comes down to capital efficiency and risk management.
So why do they force you to be a submarine on day one?
Because in the earliest stages, attacking a massive market is synonymous with taking on massive risk. Consumer preferences in a broad market are wildly fractured.
So if you launch a generic, one-size-fits-all product,
You will burn through your entire initial funding round just buying Google and Facebook ads, desperately trying to be heard over the incumbent giants. It's a fast track to bankruptcy.
is your customer acquisition cost is just way too high, like we talked about earlier.
Yes, but if you pitch a highly specific niche, VCs know you can prove product market fit much faster and much cheaper.
Because the pain is sharper.
Exactly. If you're solving an acute, burning pain point for a small, desperate group of people, you don't need a Super Bowl ad. The product sells itself through word of mouth within that community.
You bypass the massive incumbents entirely.
Right, because the incumbents don't care about a market that small.
Right.
You build a defensible stronghold with very little capital burn.
Okay, I totally understand the logic of building the stronghold. But then, once you've successfully built it, the investors suddenly want you to conquer the entire world.
Yep. They want the horizon.
Why this sudden shift in expectations? I mean, you're making money.
The shift is driven by the ruthless mathematical reality of venture capital. We have to look at the VC power law.
Let's really break down the power law, because I hear this term thrown around in startup circles all the time, but what does it actually mean for the founder listening to us right now?
If you take a VC's check, you need to understand the mathematical machine you are stepping into. Imagine a venture capital fund has $100 million to deploy.
Okay, 100 million in the bank.
And they invest $10 million into 10 different startups.
So 10 bets.
Statistically, mathematically, the fund managers assume that 7 or 8 of those startups are going to fail completely. They will go to absolute zero.
Wait, really? That is a staggering failure rate to just accept as the baseline.
It is, but it's the fundamental architecture of the asset class. They are taking bets on the extreme edge of innovation. So, knowing that 80% of the portfolio will evaporate, the 1 or 2 companies that actually succeed cannot merely be profitable.
Because a modest profit doesn't cover the smoking crater of the other 8 companies.
Exactly. A modest, profitable business does not save the fund. The winners must generate 10x, 50x, or 100x returns to cover all the catastrophic losses and still return a net profit to the institutional partners.
I see. So if I build a company that perfectly serves a small niche, let's say I make custom software for, I don't know, left-handed dentists.
A very niche market.
Very niche. And I'm making $1 million a year in pure profit. I'm thrilled. I have a great life. but the VC is furious.
To a venture capitalist, your highly profitable, stable niche business is a disaster. It has a permanent revenue ceiling. It breaks their math.
The great lifestyle business is a terrible venture capital investment.
Always. Therefore, to resolve the paradox, investors fund a concept called sequencing.
Sequencing, meaning they want a specific timeline of events.
They don't actually want a niche company, and they don't want a mass market company on day one. They want a company that presents a niche wedge, followed by a mass market horizon.
A wedge and a horizon. I love that terminology. The dossier provides some incredible examples of this sequencing. Let's look at the wedge first, with Zerodha in India.
Zerodha is an absolute masterclass in the niche wedge.
So when the founders, Nitin and Nikhil Kamath, surveyed the retail banking and brokerage sector in India, the mass market incumbents were pursuing a massive capital-intensive strategy.
Massive. They were building physical retail branches in every city, employing thousands of relationship managers, trying to educate the general public on why they should invest in the stock market.
And charging hefty percentage-based commissions for the privilege. It's the brute force method of market education. It costs a fortune.
And Zerodha looked at that and completely walked away. They did not try to educate the masses.
So who do they target?
They hyper-focused on a razor-thin, incredibly specific demographic niche. The tech-savvy, highly active, cost-conscious day trader.
People who already knew how to trade.
Exactly. These were people who already knew exactly how to trade. They were trading obsessively every single day, and they were bleeding money due to the high commissions charged by the legacy brokers.
So the burning pain point was simply the commission fee.
Yes. So Zerodha offered a flat fee, zero brokerage digital execution platform. They stripped away the relationship managers, the physical branches, the research reports.
Just giving this tiny niche of heavy users exactly what they wanted. Fast, cheap execution on their mobile phones.
The product market fit was instantaneous. They acquired their early users with almost zero marketing spend because active traders talked to other active traders.
That was the wedge. They secured their stronghold.
And from that stronghold, they eventually expanded their horizon to offer mutual funds, retirement planning, and broader financial products to a much wider audience.
But I feel like the ultimate example of this sequencing the wedge to the horizon has to be Amazon. Without a doubt.
Because people tend to have amnesia about the 1990s, and they forget that Jeff Bezos did not build the everything store on day one.
He absolutely did not. The original Amazon was a pure niche wedge, and the choice of that wedge was highly deliberate.
He started with books, but not because he loved reading, right?
No, he didn't choose books because he was passionate about literature. He chose books because they offered a structural advantage for the early internet.
What was the advantage?
Books had a massive, almost infinite global catalog of millions of titles. No physical brick-and-mortar bookstore in the world could hold that much inventory.
Right. A physical Borders or Barnes & Noble might hold, what, 100,000 titles if it's a massive superstore?
While Amazon could offer 3 million titles on a website, it was the perfect wedge to convince a skeptical 1990s consumer to put their credit card into a computer.
Because they could finally find that obscure niche book they had been hunting for years.
Exactly. Amazon completely dominated the online book niche, but the horizon was always the ultimate goal. So what did they do while they were dominating books?
They were secretly building the mass market infrastructure. They were building out the warehousing logistics network, refining their inventory management software, perfecting the one-click checkout.
And most importantly, they were accumulating customer trust.
Trust is the ultimate currency. If I trust you to successfully deliver a $10 paperback to my door, maybe next year I will trust you to deliver a $500 television.
That is the mass market horizon. They expanded horizontally, adjacent to their wedge.
From books to CDs and music to consumer electronics to toys and eventually to AWS cloud computing and literally everything else.
They satisfied the VC power law by scaling into a multi-trillion-dollar global mass market giant, but the foundation of that entire empire was a single niche wedge.
Exactly. And this context makes the insights from the Reddit and Quora founder communities so much more impactful.
Right. The dossier pulls quotes from founders discussing this massive trap they called the TAM delusion, the total addressable market delusion.
The TAM delusion is an epidemic in pitch meetings. A founder will walk into a room, pull up a slide, and say, the global pet care market is a $300 billion industry.
And if our new dog walking app can capture just 1% of that market, we will be a $3 billion company. I have heard variations of that exact pitch so many times.
It sounds so logical, right? Just 1%.
But sophisticated investors see it as a glaring red flag, don't they?
They do, because it proves that the founder has no idea who their actual initial customer is. They are relying on top-down imaginary math instead of bottom-up granular execution.
The veteran voices on those community platforms emphasize a crucial truth. An investor would much rather see a founder who has a 100% monopoly over a tiny room of 100 people who use the product obsessively every single day.
Than a founder holding a theoretical 0.001% share of an imaginary multi-billion-dollar pie.
Because you can scale obsession. You cannot scale theoretical percentages.
Beautifully said.
Okay, this is a perfect segue. We've laid the theoretical groundwork. Now, I want to step into the Hall of Fame.
Masterclasses.
Yes. The dossier outlines 10 global case studies of companies that executed this niche-to-mass transition with absolute precision. We've talked about Zerodo and Amazon, but let's dive into the international examples.
I think we should categorize these organically.
Let's do it. Let's start with companies that use geographic and demographic wedges to bypass the giants.
A prime example of this is Spotify's origin in Sweden.
Oh, this is a great one. Because when Daniel Ek founded Spotify in 2006, the music industry was essentially on fire.
It was pure chaos. The mass market was defined by the chaos of global piracy, LimeWire, Napster, BitTorrent.
And on the other side, you had this incredibly fragmented, hostile web of legacy rights holders and record labels who were just terrified of the internet.
If Ake had attempted to launch Spotify globally on day one, he would have faced two insurmountable walls.
Which were?
First, he would have been sued into oblivion by the labels. Second, he would have been crushed by the server costs of a global freemium user base. The mass market friction was just too high.
So he deployed a very tight geographic wedge. He launched Spotify exclusively in Sweden and a few select Scandinavian markets first.
Sweden was a highly strategic choice. At the time, it had one of the highest broadband penetration rates in the world and a population highly accustomed to digital consumption.
He basically needed a controlled environment, a microclimate.
Exactly. He used the high-speed Swedish market to prove that the core technology streaming audio with zero latency actually worked.
And to refine the financial mechanics of the freemium model.
But most critically, he used this small, contained market to negotiate and iron out the incredibly complex legal licensing frameworks with regional European record labels.
He proved to the industry that he could actually monetize listeners who were previously pirating music.
Once he had the data and the legal blueprint in his stronghold, then he took it to the global mass market.
He used geography as a shield while he built the weapon.
That's brilliant. Bolt from Estonia did something very similar to combat Uber, didn't they? Yeah, Marcus Villig founded Bolt, which was originally called Taxify, during a period when Uber was engaged in this heavily funded, scorched earth global land grab.
Right. Uber had raised billions and was trying to dominate every major Western capital simultaneously. London, Paris, New York.
So if you are an Estonian startup with a fraction of the funding, how do you even step to the ring with Uber?
You don't. You refuse to step into their ring.
Exactly. Bolt deliberately avoided direct mass market collisions in the Tier 1 Western cities. They realized Uber was bleeding capital, fighting local regulations in those cities, leaving massive flanks exposed.
So Bolt focused heavily on a regional niche that the Silicon Valley giant deemed secondary.
Emerging urban markets in Eastern Europe and Africa, they went where the eye of Sauron wasn't looking.
And they actually adapted to those specific niches, right? They didn't just copy Uber's app.
No, they localized heavily. In Africa, Bolt integrated highly localized mobile money payment methods that Uber's standardized Western app completely ignored.
Oh, that's smart.
And they offered lower commission structures to drivers, building intense local loyalty. By the time Uber's leadership realized the strategic importance of those regions, Bolt had already carved out a multi-billion-dollar stronghold.
It's the literal art of fighting where the enemy is not, which leads us perfectly to Pinduoduo in China.
Ah, Pinduoduo.
Because if you want to talk about dominant incumbents, Chinese e-commerce was essentially a duopoly between Alibaba and JD.com. They completely owned the mass market. How on earth did Colin Wong break into that?
By analyzing exactly who Alibaba and JD were fighting over and then completely ignoring them.
So who were they fighting over?
The mass market in China, as defined by the incumbents, was the affluent, emerging middle class in Tier 1 and Tier 2 urban centers like Beijing and Shanghai. Alibaba focused on branded goods, fast delivery, premium experiences.
So where was the white space for Pinduoduo?
The massive, completely overlooked demographic niche of low-income consumers living in Tier 3 and Tier 4 rural towns and agricultural regions.
For people who are highly price sensitive.
And largely ignored by the e-commerce giants who found the rural logistics too difficult to bother with. Pinduoduo targeted them specifically with a completely different mechanical model: interactive group buying.
Explain how that mechanism actually worked, because it's brilliant psychology.
Pinduoduo deeply integrated their platform with WeChat, the dominant social messaging app in China. If a rural consumer wanted to buy a household item like paper towels or fruit, they would see a price.
Okay, standard e-commerce so far.
But if they shared a link with 10 of their friends on WeChat and convinced them to buy the same item at the same time, the price would drop significantly for everyone.
Wow, so they basically turned their users into an unpaid marketing army.
Exactly. It was a highly social, gamified shopping experience tailored perfectly to tight-knit rural communities where finding a bargain was a social event.
And the growth must have been insane.
Astronomical viral growth within this demographic niche. They bypassed the expensive urban logistics networks entirely and scaled into an absolute giant from the bottom up.
Okay, one more demographic wedge. Nubank in Brazil. They bypassed the establishment not by targeting geography, but by targeting bureaucracy.
The banking sector in Brazil was one of the most concentrated oligopolies in the world. 5 massive legacy banks controlled over 80% of the market.
That's a monopoly, basically.
And they acted like it. They charged some of the highest interest rates and hidden fees globally, and their customer service was notoriously abysmal.
Opening an account must have been a nightmare.
It required physical visits to a branch, navigating mountains of paperwork, and passing through literal revolving security doors with armed guards. The friction was the feature. They made it hard because they had no competition.
So Nubank identified a sharp, highly frustrated niche.
Young, digitally native urbanites, millennials, and Gen Z who were entering the workforce but were effectively locked out of premium financial services because they couldn't or wouldn't navigate the archaic bureaucracy.
So what was the wedge that Nubank used?
A single product. A sleek, purple, zero-fee credit card that was managed entirely through a beautifully designed mobile app.
No branches, no paperwork.
None. Customer service that actually responded in minutes via chat. They treated a financial product like a consumer software product.
And the organic growth within that millennial niche was explosive, right? Because the incumbent banks were so universally despised.
Yeah. Nubank users became evangelists. The word-of-mouth growth was so strong that Nubank spent almost nothing on traditional customer acquisition.
And from that initial credit card wedge, they expanded their horizons.
Through checking accounts, loans, investments, they eventually became the largest fintech bank in Latin America, serving the broad mass market.
That is the perfect transition into the second group of successes from the dossier. Companies that used behavioral and tooling wedges.
They didn't target a location, they targeted a specific user behavior or frustration.
Right. Canva from Australia is a fascinating case study in behavioral targeting. And this one hits close to home for anyone who has ever tried to design a flyer.
Oh, absolutely. Before Canva, the mass market for digital graphic design was essentially a monopoly held by Adobe.
Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator. Incredible tools, but I mean, if you have ever opened Photoshop without formal training, the user interface is actively hostile.
It's terrifying.
There are 400 buttons, nested menus, overlapping layers, masking tools. It is profoundly intimidating. It makes the average person feel incompetent.
And Canva recognized that exact psychological barrier. The founders, Melanie Perkins and Cliff Obrecht, did not attempt to build a better tool for professional graphic designers.
Because Adobe had an unbreakable lock on that audience.
Exactly. Instead, Canva targeted the massive behavioral niche of non-designers, bloggers, school teachers, small business owners who desperately needed professional-looking graphics but lacked the time and technical skill to learn Photoshop.
They completely removed the intimidation.
They built a browser-based, entirely drag-and-drop template editor. They stripped away the complex terminology. They provided pre-sized templates for Facebook posts and presentation slides.
They didn't just simplify the tool, they changed the emotional experience of designing from frustrating to empowering.
They literally built a billion-dollar empire by taking the exact people that Adobe alienated and intimidated.
Which draws a direct parallel to Shopify from Canada. They faced a similar intimidation factor, but from marketplaces instead of software, right?
Yes. In the mid-2000s, if you were a small merchant wanting to sell online, the mass market options were centralized marketplaces like Amazon and eBay.
And the problem with those platforms is that they commoditize the seller.
Exactly. If you sell handcrafted leather wallets on Amazon, your product is listed on a sterile, standardized page right next to 50 cheaper competitors. You do not own the customer relationship.
You are just a supplier to Amazon's ecosystem. You can't build brand loyalty if the customer thinks they bought it from Amazon.
So Shopify identified an unserved behavioral niche, independent retail entrepreneurs who were fiercely protective of their brand identity.
They didn't want to be a commodity on Jeff Bezos' shelf. They wanted to build their own beautiful, standalone online storefronts.
So Shopify gave them the modular tooling to do exactly that, effectively arming the rebels against the Amazon empire.
I love that phrase, arming the rebels. And Rakuten in Japan took a remarkably similar merchant-first approach, didn't they?
Rakuten's a fascinating contrast to the Western e-commerce model. While Amazon prioritized standardized efficiency, making every product page look identical, Rakuten pioneered what they called the A-mall, or online shopping mall model.
Giving the merchants control.
Exactly. They provided Japanese merchants with deep customization tools, allowing them to recreate the highly personalized, high-touch customer service experience that is culturally paramount in Japanese retail.
They treated the merchants as unique partners, not just SKUs in a database.
Precisely.
The final tooling wedge the dossier highlights is SoundCloud from Germany, the anti-pop streaming wedge.
In the music streaming wars, Spotify and Apple Music were locked in a capital-intensive battle for the mass market of mainstream pop listeners, fighting over Taylor Swift and Drake.
And SoundCloud went in a completely different behavioral direction. They built a platform designed specifically for the creators, not just the passive listeners.
Their niche was the bedroom producers. Independent electronic music producers, DJs creating hour-long unauthorized remix sets, and early podcasters.
Creators who couldn't get their music on Spotify because they didn't have record labels or clear samples.
Right. SoundCloud offered them a simple, frictionless tool. Host your raw audio files here and easily embed them across the web with a distinctive waveform player.
They solved the hosting problem, and by doing so, they aggregated all the underground talent.
And by serving that specific creator niche, SoundCloud cultivated such a passionate, culturally relevant global community that they became the undisputed heartbeat of modern digital audio culture.
The mass market listeners eventually flocked to SoundCloud not for the pop hits, but to find the underground tracks they couldn't hear anywhere else.
Exactly.
Looking at all 10 of these triumphs, from Canva to Pinduoduo to Spotify, a profound pattern really emerges for me.
What stands out to you?
It really feels like none of these companies actually invented a brand new mass market out of thin air. They simply identified the specific groups of people that the existing giants were actively ignoring, or, in Adobe and the legacy banks cases, actively torturing.
It's so true.
It's like they found an anti-incumbent shield. They looked at the giant and said, "We will build a home for the exact people you intimidate or overlook." Is a niche essentially a refugee camp for the ignored customers of the mass market?
That is a phenomenal, highly accurate metaphor. A niche is absolutely a refuge for the underserved.
It makes so much sense when you frame it like that.
There is an old marketing adage, the riches are in the niches. The photographer and entrepreneur Chase Jarvis often says, if you try to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one.
Right.
The Hall of Fame proves that if you can locate the refugees of the mass market and you genuinely solve their burning specific problem, they will reward you with a level of intense evangelical loyalty that money cannot buy.
You build your stronghold on their loyalty. That is an incredibly empowering roadmap for a founder. But what happens if you ignore this advice? What if you are armed with billions of dollars in venture capital, you hire top-tier talent from Apple and Google, and you decide that you are too smart for a niche? You're just going to conquer the mass market on day one.
Then you cross the threshold into our Hall of Shame.
Let's go there, because the dossier provides a forensic breakdown of 10 absolute catastrophes. These are companies that either wildly misjudged their audience, entirely skipped the crucial niche sequencing phase, or suffered from catastrophic cultural dissonance.
Yes. Let's start with the companies that suffered from the illusion of mass appeal. They fundamentally misjudged human behavior and market tier.
I have to start with Juicero. This story is legendary in Silicon Valley circles as just the ultimate cautionary tale of hubris.
Juicero is the perfect example of forcing a niche luxury product into a mass market narrative.
The founder, Doug Evans, raised over $100 million from top-tier VCs to build what he described as the Keurig for juice.
Right. It was this beautifully designed, Wi-Fi connected, high-tech kitchen appliance that cold-pressed proprietary, subscription-based bags of pre-chopped organic produce.
And the engineering behind the machine was actually incredible. It had custom machine parts that could apply thousands of pounds of pressure, but the economic mismatch was staggering. He priced the machine at $700.
$700, and that didn't include the ongoing cost of the juice bags, which were between $5 and $8 each.
But he marketed this to the press and the public as a mass-market necessity, like this revolution in everyday, healthy living.
Which is ridiculous. The reality is that a $700 specialized kitchen appliance with a high subscription cost does not belong to the mass market.
Not at all.
It only ever belonged to an ultra-narrow, hyper-wealthy niche of convenience-obsessed consumers who have immense disposable income and care about the aesthetics of their kitchen counter.
But the real breaking point, the moment the entire illusion shattered, wasn't just the price tag. It was the Bloomberg video.
Ah, the infamous hand-squeezing revelation.
Tell us about that.
Journalists at Bloomberg published an investigative video demonstrating a fatal flaw in the entire business model. They showed that you did not actually need the $700 Wi-Fi-connected custom machine press to extract the juice.
Oh, no.
You could simply take the proprietary bag of chopped produce, squeeze it vigorously with your bare hands, and it yielded almost the exact same amount of juice in roughly the same amount of time.
It was devastating. They had built their entire identity, raised all their capital on the necessity of this high-tech hardware, and it turned out to be an entirely useless middleman.
It destroyed their consumer trust overnight. The company folded shortly after.
It was an expensive lesson in product-market fit. But that leads us to Quibi, which is a miscalculation on a much, much larger scale. They raised nearly $2 billion before they even launched.
Quibi, short for Quick Bites. The founders were Jeffrey Katzenberg, the former chairman of Walt Disney Studios, and Meg Whitman, the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard.
You're talking about the absolute peak of Hollywood royalty meeting Silicon Valley royalty.
Their premise was to build a premium, mass-market streaming platform dedicated entirely to short-form content videos 10 minutes or less.
They spent Hollywood-level budgets, millions of dollars per minute, producing high-end dramas and reality shows featuring A-list celebrities.
And they optimized the entire viewing experience strictly for mobile phones. They even had a cool feature that smoothly rotated the video if you held your phone horizontally or vertically.
The technology was cool, but who was the target audience? Who were they actually building this for?
Their hypothesized mass market was the urban commuter. They assumed that millions of people riding the subway or the bus to work every morning wanted to watch high-budget episodic dramas in 10-minute bursts.
And they were going to charge a monthly subscription fee for this premium experience. But when did they launch?
They launched in April 2020.
Yes, the very beginning of the global COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns. The daily commute completely evaporated overnight. Everyone was suddenly stuck at home, sitting in front of large screen televisions.
You can call that terrible timing a black swan event. But looking at the dossier, Quibi's strategic flaws ran much deeper than just bad timing.
They misunderstood basic human behavior on mobile devices.
Absolutely. They completely ignored the existing competitive landscape of their chosen medium. They assumed people would pay a subscription for short-form mobile video.
Completely ignoring the fact that free, highly addictive alternatives like YouTube and TikTok already dominated that exact behavioral niche.
Right. Why would a consumer pay to watch a polished 10-minute drama on a tiny screen when TikTok offers an infinite scroll of free, highly engaging, algorithmically personalized content?
It's like building a multi-billion-dollar movie theater on a train that nobody is riding. Well, everyone already has a free television in their pocket.
That's spot on. And to compound the error, Quibi's leadership made disastrous product decisions based on traditional Hollywood protectionism.
What do you mean?
At launch, the app explicitly blocked users from taking screenshots or sharing video clips to social media because of strict copyright concerns.
They blocked sharing on a mobile app.
Yes. They completely crippled the exact viral sharing loops that are fundamentally required for short-form content to succeed in the modern era.
They literally fought against the natural behavior of the internet. They burned through their massive war chest and shut the entire company down a mere 6 months after launching.
$2 billion gone in 6 months. Incredible.
Rounding out this first group of misjudgments is the Segway.
When Dean Kamen invented the Segway, the hype was unprecedented. Steve Jobs famously said it would be as big a deal as the PC.
The launch operated on the blue sky assumption that the mass market of global pedestrians would fundamentally alter how they move through cities.
They believed everyone would replace walking with their two-wheeled self-balancing device, but they ignored the physical and social reality of city sidewalks.
And the cost.
They ignored that it was incredibly expensive, nearly $5,000 at launch. They ignored that it was physically awkward to store and carry upstairs.
And they severely underestimated the legal restrictions. Many cities immediately banned them from sidewalks for safety reasons.
It was a massive generalized pitch for what was, in reality, a very narrow utilitarian niche product. It was highly useful for mall cops, warehouse workers, and guided tourist groups.
But completely impractical for the everyday commuter mass market they targeted. Okay, let's pivot to the second group in the Hall of Shame, which the dossier labels cultural arrogance.
This occurs when a massive, successful company tries to force their standardized domestic mass market playbook into a foreign country without understanding the cultural nuances of that new audience.
Let's examine Home Depot's disastrous entry into China.
This case is a profound failure of cultural anthropology. Home Depot is the undisputed king of the American mass market for do-it-yourself or DIY home improvement.
Their entire business model is built on the assumption that middle-class homeowners will eagerly spend their weekends driving to a massive warehouse, buying lumber, drywall, and power tools.
And were renovating their homes themselves in order to save money and feel a sense of accomplishment. The pioneer spirit.
Right, building your own deck is a point of pride in the American suburbs. But what was the cultural reality when they opened those massive big box stores in urban China?
They completely failed to understand the cultural relationship with manual labor.
Yep.
In urban China, particularly among the rising affluent middle class that Home Depot was targeting, physical manual labor and home repair carry a historical stigma.
Oh, wow. It's associated with a lower socioeconomic status.
Yes. So a wealthy homeowner in Beijing viewed doing their own plumbing not as a fun, money-saving weekend hobby, but as a chore that publicly signaled a lack of financial success.
The cultural ethos was not DIY, it was DIM, do it for me.
Exactly. Labor in China was relatively inexpensive, so home renovations were almost universally outsourced to local contractors or specialized tradesmen.
So Home Depot built these massive, expensive warehouses, stocked them with raw materials and tools, and the aisles just remained empty.
Basically, yeah. Chinese consumers would walk into Home Depot, treat the store like a museum or a showroom, find a light fixture or a vanity they liked, and then immediately call a local contractor to source a cheaper version and install it for them.
Ouch. So they bled money for, what, 6 consecutive years trying to force an American behavior onto a Chinese market?
Before finally admitting defeat and completely exiting the country.
A profound mismatch regarding physical labor. Now, let's contrast that with Walmart's failure in Germany, which was a catastrophic mismatch regarding emotional labor.
In the late 1990s, Walmart attempted to aggressively conquer the European mass market by acquiring existing local retail chains in Germany.
And their strategy was simply to impose their exact, highly optimized American standard operating procedures onto the German stores. They literally wanted to build Arkansas in Munich.
Exactly. Massive hypermarkets, centralized logistics, and crucially, a very distinct mandated corporate culture that focused on enthusiastic customer service.
And the German shoppers absolutely hated it. Why did the American customer service model fail so spectacularly?
It failed because of the forced performative rituals. In the United States, having a dedicated greeter standing at the front door to smile and welcome you is culturally perceived as friendly and hospitable.
But in Germany?
In Germany, shoppers found it deeply invasive, confusing, and uncomfortable to be approached by a stranger flashing an enforced corporate smile. German retail culture values efficiency and privacy over performative friendliness.
The dossier also mentions the cashiers. Walmart tried to implement American bagging procedures.
Walmart required their German cashiers to smile continuously, engage in small talk, and pack the customers' groceries into plastic bags for them.
And how did that go over?
German consumers viewed the constant smiling as fake and bizarre. They found the bagging process to be an invasion of privacy. They strongly preferred to pack their own bags at their own pace, using their own reusable totes.
It's amazing how something so small can generate so much friction.
And the friction extended to the workforce. Walmart attempted to implement American-style corporate policies, including ethics hotlines that encouraged employees to report on their coworkers' rule violations, and strictly forbidding romantic relationships between employees.
Whoa, and Europe. That must have gone terribly.
It caused massive, immediate clashes with powerful German labor unions and violated local privacy laws. The cultural rejection was absolute.
Walmart lost hundreds of millions of dollars over nearly a decade before surrendering, selling the stores to a local competitor and retreating. It just proves that you cannot mandate cultural norms from a spreadsheet thousands of miles away.
And Starbucks ran headfirst into a very similar cultural wall in Australia.
Yes, Starbucks assumed that Australia, being an English-speaking Western nation, would be a seamless carbon copy expansion of their U.S. mass-market dominance.
They expanded hyper-aggressively, opening dozens of stores very quickly in premium locations. They pushed their standard menu, sweet, highly processed, milk and syrup-heavy corporate drinks.
Frappuccinos, caramel macchiatos, pumpkin spice lattes. The problem being that Australia didn't need a Seattle corporation to teach them about coffee.
Not at all. Australia already possessed a highly sophisticated, deeply entrenched local coffee culture. Following World War II, a massive influx of Italian and Greek immigrants brought traditional espresso machines and cafe culture to Australian cities.
So by the time Starbucks arrived in the 2000s, Australians had been drinking expertly crafted artisanal flat whites and traditional espresso for decades.
So they looked at a venti caramel frappuccino with whipped cream and saw it not as premium coffee, but as a sugary, burnt milkshake.
To the Australian palate, the underlying Starbucks espresso roast tasted dark, bitter, and artificially standardized.
Furthermore, the psychological function of a cafe in Australia is entirely different. Getting coffee is a community ritual. You go to the local independent cafe on your corner where the barista actually knows your name.
Right, you chat with your neighbors. A giant standardized American chain operating like an assembly line just felt sterile and transactional.
Starbucks suffered massive financial losses, was forced to shut down 75% of their Australian locations, and retreated to operating a few novelty stores, primarily serving international tourists.
Speaking of novelty locations for tourists, that brings us to Mattel's attempt to bring Barbie to Shanghai.
In 2009, Mattel decided to launch Barbie into the massive Chinese consumer market. But instead of testing the waters, they just swung for the fences.
They built a 36,000 square foot, six-story megastore in the heart of a premium Shanghai shopping district, a literal six-story shrine to Barbie.
It was an architectural spectacle. It featured a glowing pink spiral staircase encasing 800 dolls, a full-service spa, a designer clothing floor, and a themed cafe.
They assumed that the sheer magnitude of the spectacle would generate massive retail sales and instantly create a mass market phenomenon.
But again, they fundamentally skipped the step of studying local consumer psychology.
Completely. Because in the West, Barbie benefits from decades of multi-generational nostalgia. Grandmothers bought them, mothers played with them, teenagers view them as fashion icons.
In China, Barbie was a complete newcomer. There was no inherited nostalgia.
More importantly, Chinese parents at the time culturally viewed toys primarily through the lens of education and skill development, not as lifestyle or fashion accessories.
So they built a 6-story lifestyle temple for a culture that wanted an educational tool.
What actually happened inside the building?
It became a beautifully designed tourist trap. Local families would come in droves on the weekends. They would walk up the pink staircase, take dozens of photos, perhaps eat a branded cupcake at the cafe, and then leave without purchasing a single Barbie doll.
The conversion rate from immense foot traffic to actual retail purchase was just abysmal.
The overhead costs of operating a 6-story building in one of the most expensive real estate markets in the world were unsustainable. Mattel quietly shuttered the flagship store after just 2 years.
Okay, the final group in our Hall of Shame represents Group 3, the blitzscanning logistics trap.
This occurs when a company tries to conquer a mass market geographically, moving way too fast, before the physical operational foundation is stable.
And the undisputed poster child for this failure is Target's expansion into Canada.
The Target Canada expansion is studied in business schools as a textbook operational disaster.
Instead of testing the Canadian market by opening 5 or 10 pilot stores in a single province, refining their supply chain, learning the local regulations, Target's leadership chose a massive, simultaneous rollout.
They acquired existing real estate leases from a failing Canadian chain called Zellers and attempted to open 133 fully stocked Target stores across the entire country almost simultaneously.
133 large-format retail stores at once. The logistics of filling those shelves must have been an absolute nightmare.
It was a catastrophic system overload. They attempted to implement entirely new, untested, automated inventory management software specifically for the Canadian launch.
And the software failed spectacularly.
Data was entered incorrectly. Dimensions of products were mixed up between inches and centimeters, meaning the automated systems thought pallets of goods wouldn't fit onto trucks. Products simply could not move efficiently from the distribution centers to the physical store shelves.
So when the massive marketing campaign worked and excited Canadian shoppers rushed through the doors during launch week, what did they actually find?
They found chronically embarrassingly empty shelves. The stores looked as though they had been looted.
And to make matters worse, the pricing algorithms were deeply flawed. Because of supply chain inefficiencies and inaccurate currency exchange assumptions, the prices in Target Canada were noticeably higher than what Canadians were accustomed to seeing when they drove across the border to shop at U.S. Target stores.
They fundamentally shattered their own core brand promise. Expect more, pay less.
Canadians expected more and got empty shelves, and they were asked to pay higher prices for the privilege. The damage to the brand was irreversible.
They bled billions of dollars, never achieved profitability in a single quarter, filed for bankruptcy protection within 2 years, closed all 133 stores, and laid off over 17,000 Canadian employees. It was a failure of arrogant velocity.
We see similar logistical scaling traps with startups too, especially during the dot-com boom and the subsequent gig economy boom. The dossier mentions Pets.com and a company called Beepy.
Yes, Pets.com is the classic .com failure. They identified a massive, total addressable market pet owners and tried to capture the entire nation right out of the gate with millions of dollars spent on Super Bowl commercials featuring their famous sock puppet.
But they ignored the brutal physics of unit economics. Pet food and cat litter are incredibly heavy, bulky, and low margin.
You can't ship a 40-pound bag of dog food via FedEx across the country without losing money on every single transaction. Without an established, highly dense, localized distribution network, the shipping costs destroyed them.
Beepy, a decade later, made a similar error with even heavier assets.
Beepy was a startup trying to revolutionize the used car market. They built a peer-to-peer digital marketplace to bypass the terrible high-pressure dealership experience.
The core idea was actually great. Buy a used car on your phone and have it delivered to your driveway. The user experience vision was great.
But they tried to blitz-scale the operations nationwide much too quickly. Used cars are not software code. They are highly fragmented, heavy physical assets.
When someone wanted to sell a car on Beepy, the company had to send a certified mechanic to inspect it, handle the DMV paperwork, detail the car, pick it up on a flatbed truck, store it, and eventually deliver it to the buyer. The physical logistics were monstrously complex.
And as they expanded into new cities rapidly, those logistics broke down. They expanded faster than they could hire competent operational teams.
And to artificially drive mass market adoption and show top-line revenue growth to their investors, they began essentially bribing users, right?
They offered absurd, financially ruinous perks. They were giving away free iPads or $1,000 flight vouchers to anyone who simply bought or sold a car on the platform.
So their unit economics were massively negative. They were literally paying people to take their service.
Every time a transaction occurred on the platform, Beepy lost thousands of dollars. They burned through $149 million in venture capital in a shockingly short amount of time before the money dried up, and they abruptly shut down operations.
It's absolutely wild to me sitting here looking at these case studies. Companies like Juicero, Quibi, Beepy, and Target had billions of dollars in funding.
They had access to the top engineering talent, the best supply chain consultants, the most famous Hollywood executives.
Yet they failed because they fundamentally misunderstood basic, grounded reality, like the fact that people can squeeze a bag with their hands, or that commuters aren't taking the train during a pandemic, or the simple, undeniable physics of moving a used car across state lines.
It makes me wonder, does having too much venture capital actually blind you to the niche you should be serving?
Does an overflow of money insulate you from reality and breed a fatal arrogance?
It is a very astute observation, and it's a known phenomenon in venture capital. We call it the curse of too much money.
When a founder has hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, they can afford to ignore reality for a very long time.
They don't have to listen to the subtle feedback of a niche audience because they can simply subsidize a flawed product by blasting it with paid marketing. They can artificially inflate their growth metrics.
But eventually, the money runs out and gravity takes hold. As Dr. Gupta sums it up perfectly in the dossier, The most dangerous strategy for any startup is to jump into a massive market with a generic product.
So after touring the Hall of Fame and the Hall of Shame, the ultimate question is, how do we safely navigate this growth?
Exactly. How do you, the listener, avoid ending up in this graveyard? That brings us to our final section, the strategic playbook.
The dossier lays out 10 distinct frameworks for scaling, pulled from the StartupLanes ecosystem. Let's break these down, explain the mechanics, and give you a practical toolkit for choosing your path.
We can categorize these 10 strategies into 3 distinct buckets: niche-focused approaches, aggressive mass market approaches, and hybrid models designed to transition seamlessly.
Let's begin with the niche strategies. The first, and perhaps most resilient, is bootstrap scaling or organic growth.
This means entirely rejecting the VC power law we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
You don't take any outside venture capital money.
Correct. You fund your early operations and your growth exclusively through your own early customer revenues. This approach forces absolute, ruthless financial discipline.
Because you don't have millions of dollars to burn on broad advertising, you are forced to target a hyper-specific, high-margin problem for a very narrow audience. You have to achieve profitability on almost every transaction.
Every dollar earned is carefully reinvested back into the product. The dossier highlights MailChimp here. They operated as a proudly bootstrapped company in Atlanta for nearly 2 decades.
Deliberately ignoring enterprise clients to serve the niche of small businesses and independent bloggers who just wanted simple email marketing tools. They grew methodically, sustainably, until they were eventually acquired for $12 billion without ever taking a dime of VC money.
A phenomenal outcome. The second niche framework is community-led growth. In this model, a passionate, highly specialized user community becomes your primary engine for both customer acquisition and customer support.
Instead of buying Google Ads, you invest your resources into building open forums, Discord servers, or hosting niche events. So the users become the marketing team.
And the support team. The community members troubleshoot software bugs for each other, create tutorials, and evangelize the brand to their peers.
But this remains a niche strategy because you cannot manufacture an authentic, deeply engaged community at a mass market scale overnight. It requires a shared, specific identity.
The dossier points to Supabase, an open-source database tool, which grew massively by fostering a cult-like loyalty among a very specific niche of open-source developers.
The third niche strategy is brilliant, particularly for software companies. The SaaS land and expand strategy.
This is a highly tactical enterprise sales maneuver. Historically, selling software to a massive Fortune 500 company required a grueling top-down sales pitch to the chief information officer, resulting in a $1 million company-wide contract. The sales cycles took years.
Land and expand bypasses that entirely.
Yeah.
By sneaking in the back door.
Exactly. You secure a tiny, microscopic initial footprint inside the giant organization. You offer your software at a very low price, or even a free tier, to one single, narrow team, say, a squad of 5 front-end developers.
You solve a burning problem just for them. That is the wedge.
Yes. As that small team uses the tool every day and proves its immense value, word spreads horizontally across the office. The marketing team sees the developers using it, so they adopt it. Then the HR team adopts it.
Eventually, the usage becomes so widespread organically that the IT department is forced to officially sanction it and sign an enterprise-wide contract. Slack is the most famous example of this.
They infiltrated massive corporations by sneaking into single engineering teams, completely avoiding the traditional top-down mass-market sales fight until they had already won.
Okay, those are the methodical niche plays. Now let's examine the aggressive mass-market strategies. These are high-risk, high-reward. The first one is blitzscaling.
Blitzscaling, a term popularized by Reid Hoffman, prioritizes extreme breakneck speed over operational efficiency.
The strategy is to raise colossal amounts of venture capital and intentionally, aggressively burn that cash to artificially outpace competitors, saturate all advertising channels, and fundamentally dominate the market share before anyone else can react.
But based on the BP disaster we just talked about, this is incredibly dangerous. When does this strategy actually make economic sense?
It only makes mathematical sense in very specific, massive winner-take-all or winner-take-most markets that rely on network effects. Uber and DoorDash are the prime examples.
They subsidized the cost of rides and food deliveries for years, losing billions of dollars specifically to starve their competitors of drivers and customers, establishing a global mass-market monopoly before they ever worried about generating net profitability.
It's a war of attrition funded by billionaires. The second mass market approach is geographic and channel expansion scaling. This sounds like the exact opposite of what Target did in Canada.
It is the methodical antidote to Target's disaster. In this framework, you completely master your supply chain, your management structure, and your unit economics in Market A. You ensure that the foundation is rock solid and profitable.
Only then do you methodically replicate that exact model outward to adjacent market B step by step instead of jumping across the ocean.
Exactly. Walmart's historical expansion across the United States in the 1970s and 80s was a masterclass in this. They didn't open stores randomly on the coasts, they built massive regional distribution hubs.
And then slowly rolled out physical stores in a tight geographic radius around those hubs, expanding outward state by state like an ink blot. The third mass market strategy is franchise and licensing scaling.
Think McDonald's or Domino's Pizza. The core corporate entity perfects a highly replicable, standardized business model.
They then grant independent, local operators the legal right to use that brand and model in exchange for upfront fees and ongoing revenue royalties. So the corporate entity isn't paying for the real estate or hiring the cashiers.
Correct. It allows a brand to achieve massive global physical volume by leveraging local entrepreneurial capital and local management expertise, drastically reducing the financial risk on the corporate balance sheet.
Okay, let's look at the final bucket, the hybrid strategies. These are fascinating because they structurally begin as a hyper-targeted niche, but the product mechanics are designed to transition into mass market adoption almost automatically.
The first is product-led growth, or PLG. In a PLG model, the software product itself serves as the primary driver of customer acquisition, retention, and expansion.
There is very little reliance on a traditional sales team. A user typically signs up for a free or low-cost tier to solve a very specific niche task.
But the product has a viral loop built into its core function. Calendly is the perfect example here.
Exactly. I sign up for Calendly simply to solve my own niche, frustrating problem of scheduling meetings without emailing back and forth. But the product requires me to interact with others.
Every single time I send my Calendly scheduling link to a client or a colleague, I am organically exposing the product to a new potential user.
The core utility of the product inherently acts as its own mass market advertising engine. The eighth framework is platform and marketplace scaling.
This relies entirely on the mechanics of network effects, meaning that the platform becomes exponentially more valuable to every user as more total participants join. But to get there, you have to solve the cold start problem.
The cold start problem is the bane of marketplaces. You need buyers to attract the sellers, but the sellers absolutely will not join an empty platform without buyers. So how do you break the deadlock?
You start hyper-locally. You constrain the marketplace to a microscopic niche until you achieve liquidity. The famous example is Airbnb.
They did not launch globally. They started by simply renting out a few air mattresses on the floor of their apartment in San Francisco during one specific, highly attended industrial design conference when all the local hotels were sold out.
They constrained both the geography and the demographic. Once they proved liquidity in that micro niche, they slowly expanded city by city, balancing the supply and demand until it became a global mass market platform.
The ninth strategy is growth hacking.
Growth hacking is a highly analytical, data-driven discipline that uses unconventional, very low-budget technological tactics to drive massive user acquisition. It often involves exploiting the structural rules or APIs of existing massive platforms.
Like Airbnb cross-posting their early listings onto Craigslist to siphon off Craigslist's massive audience.
Exactly. Or the classic example of Dropbox. Instead of buying expensive ads, they embedded a highly incentivized referral loop deep into the product interface.
They offered users additional free gigabytes of cloud storage space simply for inviting their friends to join. They turned every early niche tech adopter into a highly motivated viral growth agent, propelling them into the mass market.
And finally, framework number 10. The strategy the dossier refers to as the absolute holy grail for a founder, category creation.
Category creation is a master-level strategic play. Instead of trying to carve out a niche in an existing crowded market, you actively invent, define, and relentlessly evangelize an entirely new industry category that did not previously exist.
You convince the business world that they suffer from a problem they didn't even have the vocabulary to describe, and then you position your company as the sole authoritative solution.
Like HubSpot inventing the term inbound marketing. Before them, marketing was just buying ads and cold calling. HubSpot coined the phrase, wrote books about it, and hosted conferences about it.
It starts hyper niche because nobody's searching Google for a term that doesn't exist yet. but the goal is to evangelize the philosophy until it becomes a mass-market, industry-standard necessity.
You aren't just playing the game. You are writing the rulebook for a completely new game, ensuring you are the only one who can win it.
So bringing all of this immense theory and history back to you, the listener, you are staring at that whiteboard. You have to choose your path.
Let's apply what the dossier calls the StartupLanes test. It is a framework of 3 highly practical questions to help you determine your audience strategy today.
Number 1, the resource constraint test. Are you short on cash? Be honest about your runway. If the answer is yes, you must go niche.
Do not attempt to fight the deafening noise of a broad mass market without incredibly deep pockets. You will lose.
Number 2, the pain intensity index. Are you solving a mild, nice-to-have convenience, or are you solving an agonizing, burning problem?
Broad mass markets usually deal in mild conveniences. Niches are defined by burning problems. Find the burn and solve it completely.
And number 3, the expansion horizon test. If you capture this tiny niche today, does it logically, seamlessly connect to a much bigger adjacent market tomorrow?
Can your tiny online bookstore eventually become the logistics engine that sells electronics and cloud computing? That 3-part framework is vital for survival.
Because, as Dr. Gupta reminds us in the closing notes of the sources, action without direction is just motion.
As a founder, you can run incredibly fast, you can execute your product roadmap perfectly, and you can work 80-hour weeks. But if you are running in the wrong direction, aiming all that effort at the wrong audience, you are merely accelerating your own failure.
You must use these frameworks to ensure your strategy is pointed at the exact right target before you begin to sprint.
So let's take a breath and unpack everything we have explored on this deep dive. We started in the high-density, block-by-block, data-driven street warfare of quick commerce, redefining what a niche actually looks like.
We navigated the treacherous waters of the investor's paradox, understanding why you must prove the niche wedge to satisfy the venture capital mathematics of the mass market horizon.
We walked through the Hall of Fame, analyzing how Shopify empowered alienated merchants in Canva rescued intimidated non-designers by acting as brilliant anti-incumbent shields.
And we walked through the Hall of Shame, learning the brutal, multi-billion-dollar lessons of Juicero's technological hubris, Quibi's behavioral miscalculations, and Walmart's catastrophic cultural blindness in Germany.
Finally, we laid out the tactical playbook from the financial discipline of bootstrapping to the high-stakes gamble of blitzscaling to help you actually execute your vision.
The overarching, undeniable lessons synthesized across all of these case studies and data points is that your target audience isn't merely a passive choice you select on a marketing slide. It is the structural, architectural foundation of your company's survival.
You fundamentally cannot be everything to everyone. You must locate your true people, understand the specific nuances of their pain deeply, and build your product exclusively for them until your stronghold is simply too big for the rest of the world to ignore.
Exactly, you consolidate your firepower.
Now, we have spent this entire hour talking extensively about the strategic choice between slotting your product into an existing niche or battling an existing mass market. But I want to leave you with one final lingering thought, building on that ultimate strategy of category creation we just discussed.
As you look at your whiteboard, what if your true, perfect audience doesn't even have a name yet?
What if your ultimate job as a visionary founder isn't to meticulously find a pre-existing niche to squeeze yourself into, but rather to invent an entirely new category, build the tools for it, and force the world to learn the vocabulary that you created?
That is the ultimate challenge. That is how the future is actually built.
Something for you to mull over as you pick up that marker. Thank you for exploring this deep dive into the StartupLanes dossier with us and for spending your time dissecting these strategies. Keep building, keep focusing your firepower, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.